Hey there, and welcome to 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Speier. Brian Abraham, farm director, is going to join us in just a little bit after a flurry of activity yesterday to solidify the 40-man roster. We'll get to all that. Alex, we missed you at the Tradition last night, another great event from the Sports Museum. The final conversation of the night was Fred Lynn and Jim Rice reminiscing on the World Series 50 years ago. We had Fred, of course, in the podcast not long ago. But a couple years back, you got to come along with Dennis Eckersley when we honored him. And I love the format because the athlete we honor gets to bring what we call a presenter, which is only a presenter because that person gives the honoree the trophy. And then the three of us get to sit down and have a long form conversation. But it puts, you put Dennis Eckersley at ease a couple of years ago. And last night, Devin McCourty got Vince Wilfork to tell some stories that Vince might not have told on his own. It's a great format. I wish we did it more often, but it's just such a great event. It was another fun one last night at the Garden.
Yeah, the idea is that it creates an intimacy between the players or the honorees and the people who are in attendance. And I really think that it's a special event because it does lower the wall. The opportunity to directly mingle with the people who are being honored is also pretty extraordinary for those who are in attendance. But it's a very different conversation than what you typically see. Certainly than what you saw from players during their careers, when it tends to be like that narrow, like rat-a-tat of this happened, what happened, this happened, what happened, right? Like, it's not that. It's this unguarded conversation that tends to flip over these wonderful rocks and give insight into the people and into their athletic lives, but also into their personal, the intersection of their personal and professional lives in a way that's pretty unusual. And Tom, you do an amazing job of facilitating those conversations. Like, you're kind to say that I put Eck at ease, but I was writing your coattails pretty much. It's a great format, and people who go never regret going.
And last night again, there's always a couple unexpected. Gabby Thomas, shout out to your fellow Harvard alum. What an impressive human being she is. I mean, you and I were talking before, the apex human being that is Gabby Thomas. She's the fastest, she's the smartest, she's the best looking. Like, she is just got it all together. What an impressive person. The work she's doing in the healthcare space, trying to help underserved communities with her neurobiology degree that she got at Harvard while winning gold medals in the Olympics. Like, just incredible person that she is.
It's almost unfathomable, right? To be the best at something in the world, and yet to have that be kind of a hobby. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but to be so deeply invested into the cause of health and well-being of others and social justice, as a career, as a vocation. It is mind-blowing to be able to balance those things. And really, one of the we talk so much in this realm about, like, the commitment that's necessary for athletes to be able to identify the path to being the best version of themselves, how full that commitment needs to be, how year-round, how meticulous they have to be in their training regimens, and to think that it's possible to be engaged in this pursuit of an advanced degree, of an entirely separate career, while also being the best in the world at something, is just staggering.
And I brought it up with her last night as we go on a tangent here, but for the Olympians, 4 years is a long time. And I asked her that, and she said, people don't understand how hard it is to get there, but how incredibly hard it is to stay there. And if you're talking about, in her case, she gets to Los Angeles, which is her plan, in 2.5 years. That'll be 3 Olympics. So it's an 8-year span of remaining elite, and that's a generation almost, right? In a sport, right? Where somebody who was 13 or 14 when you first meddled is now in their prime coming for you. And it's staggering that she's able to do everything she's doing, in her career away from track and field, and yet still maintain her status as one of the fastest women on the planet.
And it's really interesting too, because if you apply it to the baseball realm, like the thing that we always talk about is like, what's the first skill? What's the first tool that degrades over time? Speed. And so the ability to be able to maintain, like what you have to do in order to be able to maintain status as an elite sprinter is, you really have to push yourself physically in order to defy natural aging curve stuff. And so yes, you're doing that not against the backdrop of races that are occurring on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, but over this broad span of time. So the discipline that you need to be able to apply in order to remain elite is just amazing. And again, on top of being a neurobiologist, being in the healthcare space and serving a broad community of people, in acts that are much more important even than the professional career that you're cultivating. It's remarkable.
It is remarkable. All right, to baseball now, because that's what we're supposed to be talking about. Right. An interesting day yesterday. The deadline to get players on your 40-man roster who could be Rule 5 eligible. You're trying to clean some of that up so that you don't lose players for nothing. Sometimes that comes, and yesterday certainly did for the Red Sox, at the expense of players currently on the 40-man roster, right? So Nathaniel Lowe is gone. That was a fairly easy one. A couple of other trades, I think most notably, Chris Murphy was traded, but Brennan Bernardino, who had really been their most used lefty for the most part, in a non-closing situation other than Chapman. Bernardino had answered the call. He had been the break glass in case of emergency, and they broke glass almost every night. And now he is shipped off. But before we dig into what it all means for the 40-man and the Rule 5, we'll do that with Brian Abraham. Let's just take a moment of appreciation for Brennan Bernardino, his incredible journey just to become a major league pitcher, becoming, in his 30s when he really hit his major league prime, after scouring the world for opportunities and walking into front offices and asking for an opportunity. Brennan Bernardino found a home in Boston and was a really good pitcher for the Sox over the last couple of years.
And at times literally found a home, because he spent the offseason after his first season with the Red Sox in 2023 living in Boston. He was the rare Red Sox player who actually kind of took up residence in the city and enjoyed it, enjoyed the experience of snow. But yeah, totally different perspective on what it meant to be in the big leagues, to have that opportunity to pitch in, I believe, 169 games over the course of these last 3 seasons, and that was with some detours back up and down to AAA. But he was someone who had invested, who had to come back to the big leagues the hard way, back to professional baseball the hard way. And it was really interesting last year when we were in Monterrey, Mexico, just before the start of the season, to see Brennan Bernardino there and so deeply invested in some of the off-field things that were happening in conjunction with that Red Sox trip, because, it meant a lot to him to be in Mexico where he had pitched, in order to get back into professional baseball. And he felt that he owed a great deal to Mexico in launching his career. He had great appreciation for what it meant to compete there. And so but by virtue of this kind of global, this global hopping around in order to make his career happen, he had enormous appreciation and was keenly aware of what it meant that he was in the big leagues, never took it for granted, competed like crazy as a different kind of pitcher, someone who wasn't operating at the high end of the velocity spectrum, and probably, he kept trying to push to get as much as he could, but just like a guy who had a feel for the craft of pitching and how to locate and how to avoid big contact in a way that made him, valuable, a valuable contributor, at times a critical contributor for the Red Sox over the course of his 3 seasons.
There were times last year where you'd look at that bullpen and say, man, that's a lot of lefties. And clearly, Bernardino now, Murphy, they're both gone. 2 of the pitchers they bring up onto the 40-man are right-handed. Do you think that was one of the goals of the offseason, try to add to the right-handed relief options they'll have?
Well, and let's not forget that Justin Wilson is a free agent as well. So I think that there's probably a desire to have a more balanced 40-man roster in terms of the right left. But I think that right now it's probably skewed a little further to the right than where it's maybe going to end up. I do think that the Red Sox are going to be exploring options for how to add maybe another lefty into the equation. Shane Drohan who was added to the 40-man roster yesterday, was someone who was really interesting last year. Only threw 54 innings because he was sidelined for a couple of months by forearm soreness, but he was a guy who showed like great swing and miss traits on a pretty broad mix of pitches for a healthy chunk of the season. I think he had a 35% strikeout rate over the course of those 54 innings, which puts him in a position where it was starter stuff. He has whether or not he's able to withstand a starter's workload is questionable. My guess is that he would open the season in the Woo Sox rotation, but be a consideration for the Red Sox in either a multi-innings relief role or as a spot starter. But certainly he adds to the mix. But yeah, I think that Tom, you're right in saying that they probably needed more right-handed options moving forward, but also now they might need another to deepen their left-handed pool.
There's certainly a lot to talk about there. Let's get to it with Brian Abraham. He's the farm director of the Red Sox. After a busy day, now a better idea of where they will be going into the Rule 5 draft, which is on the final day of the winter meetings, now just a few weeks away. Brian Abraham of the Red Sox, the farm director, he's our guest on this edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. It's Brian Abraham joining us now. And Brian, before we get going, it's been a busy, important week of birthdays. David Ortiz, we celebrated his 50th birthday the other day. We won't say what year. My birthday, we celebrated, but I share a birthday with your son, and that was a big birthday for him as well.
It was number 12, so we're getting up there, but always easy to wish you a happy birthday the same day I wish my son a happy birthday. So happy we're able to make that work.
Yeah, thank you. You are one of the first ones I get every year. Pat Kamir, our former photographer, is exactly 10 years younger than me on the same day. So I hear from him every day as well, and I remind him how happy I am that those awful, milestone birthdays are so far behind me. I can just live a life of peace and not worry about age because I am old. The rule, yesterday is such a busy day, and it's kind of it's not a day that I think a lot of Major League Baseball fans pay a lot of attention to, but it's a really important day for the organization, right? The maneuvering, the getting the 40-man lined up so that, you sort of know where you stand on Rule 5 coming up. How do you feel about how it went? There were some Major League moves made to make some moves, but when the dust sort of settles, how do you feel about where everything stands today?
Yeah, I think pretty good. There's a lot of conversations that happen between the leadership group and our staff throughout not only the last couple of days or last couple of weeks, but throughout the entire year with a lot of the roster decision making coming to mind. So it's not obviously there's one day of action, exciting action, whether it be trades, adding people to the 40-man, but I think a lot of the preparation and getting an understanding of where our roster is, where we want it to be. The flexibility that we need to have with it as we move forward into the more thorough part of the offseason is really important. But I'm excited to add a few really interesting young pitching arms. Made some trades to bring in some other really good young players, and some of the players that moved on or were sent to other teams. Obviously, opportunities for them elsewhere. But really appreciate the time that they put in with the Boston Red Sox, and excited about the new jerseys for the players that we were able to receive.
Yeah, there are so many moves that happen, right? Like with the 3 players who were added to the 40-man roster, all pitchers, Shane Drohan, a lefty, as well as Tyler Uberstein, and David Sandlin, both righties. And then you're trading out multiple left-handed pitchers and Brennan Bernardino, as well as Chris Murphy. You're trading out Alex Hoppe, particularly with guys like Bernardino and with Bernardino and Murphy, as well as Josh Winkowski, and then getting those other guys onto the 40-man roster. How much is this a day of trying to set yourselves up for a flexible roster, one where you have optionable players who can shuttle down and be depth between the big leagues and AAA, as opposed to having those out of options guys who kind of have a very narrow path to being able to contribute over the course of the year?
Yeah, I think that definitely comes into play. Brez and the rest of the leadership group obviously has put a lot of thought into what they want our roster to look like on November 19th. The reality is it will not look the same as it does today, as it does in the middle of June. So putting ourselves in the best position to have flexibility, to add, to deal with injuries, to deal with the uncertainties that come with the season is incredibly important. So I think there's a lot of things that get balanced when you're making these types of decisions, which is why it's an exciting date. It seems pretty ordinary on the surface, but there's so many different things that can happen, whether it be adding guys to the 40-man, moving on from guys that might not have the flexibility that is needed, and then bringing on some younger depth and youth as well. So every team and organization handles this differently, and I think it's balancing the current roster with what is going to be best for the future roster. And some of that is unknown. So I think a lot of those conversations need to be had about what can put us in the best position to be versatile, be flexible, and be able to make decisions on the move as the season progresses and the offseason evolves.
So part of what's interesting about today is that it at least gives some indication of larger patterns within the organization. You're adding 3 guys who have come through the system onto the 40-man roster, right? You have 3 guys who you've identified as big league contributors through the system. You're trading out other guys who are either homegrown in the case of Chris Murphy and Alex Hoppe, or who really kind of saw their careers take a step forward in Brennan Bernardino. Those are tradable guys, right? They have value throughout baseball, and it speaks to me of the larger picture of the state of pitching in your organization. All of a sudden, you guys, in terms of the state of your system, the top end prospects are heavy on arms. Is it strange for you to kind of step back? This is the first time that you, as the farm director, have been in a place where you can say unequivocally, the strength of the system is pitching.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's strange, but it's definitely a little bit different than what I think this organization has been used to over the recent years. And again, it's a testament to our pitching group, our pitching leadership, Brez and the leadership to acquire unique arms, unique talent, but also I think for our staff on the ground to develop young players that not only come in as good players, but end up becoming even better in changing and adjusting and evolving, whether it be through their bodies or their pitch mix or how they're throwing particular pitches. I think all those things come into play, but it's a really exciting time with our pitching group to have more than a handful of arms that we feel like can make an impact at different levels throughout the organization. And I think especially, one of the things that maybe we've struggled with at times is having those major league depth options, having guys that can go up and be starting pitchers, having guys that can go up and make an impact in the bullpen versus just a short-term cup of coffee where they can be utilized for a week or two. I think we have a lot of interesting young arms and talented arms and impactful arms that can go up and be legitimate arms that can be utilized throughout an entire season. And I feel like there's still growth for each of them, and that's what's really exciting.
In yesterday's moves, you pick up a couple of catching prospects. Was that an area where you look to build up that depth a little bit? Obviously, after the Kyle Teal trade a year ago, Narvaez worked out great. We've talked a lot about, at this point, or certainly even midway through spring training last year, we weren't sure how the major league catching depth was going to line up, who would make that team. So how important were those pickups yesterday, and what does that do for your catching depth?
Yeah, I think every team probably has different targets and valuations on players that they're looking for when it comes to these types of trades, and there's a lot of back and forth that happens. But getting Ronnie and Heyman, I think is going to really help our catching depth at the lower levels, an area we feel like we can develop some of our young guys that have made strides. And we've seen some small steps from some of our players, but whenever you can increase the pool of talent at such an important position, it's going to be helpful. 2 guys that both can swing the bat a little bit, feel like they have some areas that they can improve upon defensively, that with Tyson Blazer, our coordinator that oversees catching, and our staff is going to be able to help So we're really excited about those two guys. And again, I think it's such an important position. It's sometimes maybe undervalued because the bat, which is usually the driver of, exciting, highlights and what happens on the field isn't probably seen so much from behind the plate, but it's a position that relies on leadership, relies on handling a pitching staff. You see like Carlos this year, how much he did without his bat that made an impact with our team and our organization. And we think we got a couple guys that can continue to push that forward.
One of them, Ronnie Hernandez, comes from the White Sox, 21-year-old single-A catching prospect. That's like your third deal with the White Sox in about 11 months now. They've become a pretty common dance partner. Is that unusual to keep going back to one team? Or, from what you see along the way, are these just, you make one deal and you say, well, we were talking to them about this other guy. Like, how does one deal lead to another deal in a case like this?
Yeah, I think you build relationships and trust amongst other executives, and the people that are having those conversations feel like they have an understanding of our farm system, and similarly for them, we feel like we have an understanding of their farm system, wants, needs, all those things have to match up. So sometimes I think it might just be random that it works out that way, but I think when you have conversations previously about players and what the needs are, you already are ahead of the game when it comes to that next conversation because you've had awareness and an understanding of where teams are. So I think it helps speed up those convos and make things a little bit more real versus just throwing names out there. So I do think that helps, but I think it just so happens that we made a couple of deals with the White Sox. I don't know if that's a trend, but we'll see what happens as we move in more into the offseason.
Yeah, all trades go through left-handed pitchers with going either to or from the White Sox. So speaking, again, looping back on the pitching front, you guys obviously brought up Peyton Tolley this year. You guys obviously also had some very good performance from Connolly Early, who was the starting pitcher in your final game of the season. How do you view their ability to, how would you characterize their readiness to compete for rotation spots come spring training? And in particular, Early looked like Early was able to execute with a pretty complete mix over those few big league starts that he made. That's why he got the ball in Game 3 of the wild card series. Tolley obviously ended up being moved into that narrower role of the bullpen because of his work to get a more complete mix. All things being equal, would it be fair to characterize Early as a guy who'd be like right in the mix for a big league rotation spot in spring training as things stand right now, and Tolley maybe being wanting a little bit more development time to establish that mix?
I think I'd probably say both could use development opportunities, whether that happens in AAA or the big leagues. I think we'd be happy with both, but I think a lot will depend on what we do this offseason and the competition that happens during spring. I do think it's unique for both of them in the sense that they got called up towards the end of the season. They were able to pitch in the playoffs and have some unique experiences and exposure that I think when we're trying to evaluate a roster and where guys fit, we always tend to say, like, do they have these qualities? Do they have these experiences? They both have them. So I think along with that, plus continued development, growth this offseason, continue to identify areas within their pitch mix that they can improve upon, I think they're both going to be in the competition for starting spots. And again, a lot depends on what happens this offseason, where we currently are, where we will be as we roll into February. But, as both guys on the 40-man, both guys that have shown they can start in the big leagues, I think I'd be remiss to say that they wouldn't both be in the competition for the starting roles and starting rotation spots. And if they don't end up there, I think we have an incredibly exciting group of young talent that will be in AAA to also help throughout the time. So I think that they're going to impact the big leagues at some point, whether that is the start of the season, the middle of the season, or the end of the season is yet to be seen. But we're really excited about their development and the opportunities they were able to take advantage of, and fun to watch both of them be able to pitch in those types of settings at the end of the season. I think that's something, it's a little bit different for a pitcher than a position player for someone like myself. Very much so on the edge of my seat, watching those guys take the ball every pitch versus kind of, 4 at-bats a game. So really exciting for the organization, our pitching group, and the players themselves, 2 kids that want to get better, which I think is the foundation for success in the major leagues. We have a lot of that with our guys on the big league team, and really excited about what they can do.
I mean, I think a lot about like Tolley and just how insanely fast he moved, right? Like he really is analogous to Christian Campbell in some ways because he was a guy who was never a full-time starting pitcher in college, right? He was a two-way player. He became more geared towards the pitching side in his last year of college at TCU after he transferred there. But that's 1 year as primarily a pitcher, but not solely a pitcher, followed by 1 year as solely a pitcher, in which his velocity exploded and you guys introduced like 12 new pitch shapes to him and had him like trying to figure out a new secondary pitch every other week. Based on the trajectory that he was able to go through, getting to the big leagues within that 1 year and making all kinds of adjustments along the way, even though he's not a finished product, where on earth is the ceiling for someone who made that much progress that quickly, given the background?
Yeah, it's a high one. I don't know where it is, but it's a high one. To me, his ability to take on information and then apply it directly onto his craft is something that has been really cool to see. And I think you hear that on the position player side. I actually think I heard Pete talk about that with Roman in the sense that they asked him to do something with his hands. He made an adjustment, and then that week in the game, he was already doing it. His ability to retain information and apply it to games at bats. I think Peyton does that on the pitching side. And I think it goes to show how much these decisions matter and how much we need to look in the future. We started him in Greenville this year, which is not abnormal for a college pitcher, but I think back to some of the conversations we had about whether he'd start in Salem or Greenville. And if he had started in Salem, I think maybe the opportunity to pitch in Boston at the end of the season might not have been a reality because his progress would have been probably expedited to a point where we weren't comfortable. So be able to start him in Greenville and then seeing him slowly progress and develop and make adjustments throughout his time all the way up to AAA, I think really showed us that he'd be able to take on new challenges and continue to excel at them. So we're really excited about where he is. I know I keep saying that, but there's a lot of excitement on our pitching side. And to see someone like Payne, again, retain the information, then apply it, I think is what sets him apart and do it so quickly.
Brian, we're seeing more and more, especially on the pitching side, right? More and more guys rocket through the system. Trey Savage, right, winds up starting in Single A, winds up pitching in the World Series and being a really important part of that. Obviously, it's based on the individual, right? The talent level and the adaptability of a guy to process the information you give him. But how does it change, even in the time you've been doing this? You have these guys now, by and large, at least the top arms, for a lot less time than you used to. And it seems like that's where we're going. These college pitchers are pretty much ready to rocket through the system. So, how does that change? What does that change for a farm system? How, as far as, like Alex was saying, you teach them 12 pitches, you got a whole lot less time to teach them the 12 new pitches, right? Like how does that change and what kind of challenges does that pose to a farm system?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives, whether we get a guy from college who is probably already more advanced than maybe they would have been 5 years ago, just because of the information that college teams have and their ability to ask players and pitchers to do certain things. And then for us, our ability to push guys because we have better information. We can track progress. We can use our tools to maybe make more of an educated guess on what their pitches might do when they move a particular way, if they put their hand in a certain position or they change the grip of a particular pitch. We have much more information to better identify those areas and allow a player to enact on them really quickly versus I think maybe in the past we asked a player to do something and it just took time to see if it actually would work. I think we have a much better job of being able to predict what will happen and how a smaller window of success or failure will look over the longer term. The challenging part is there is a real development piece to this that does matter. It's handling the minor leagues, it's handling professional baseball, some of these kids being out on their own for the first time, understanding some of the nuances of playing in a big league ball game and trying to win, and the little things that matter, whether it be PFPs, backing up a bag. Those things are obviously taught in the minor leagues and taught a significant amount of time, but when a player goes through a system really fast, they might not have as much time working on those areas versus going out and working on their pitch mix every 5 to 6 days. So I think there are some of those challenges that might not maybe be seen every day, but in big situations or when something happens in a playoff atmosphere or big league atmosphere, they are magnified because a player, not due to more so due to their success and the quickness that they moved, might not have as good of a hand on it. And that's when we really rely on the ability to develop at the major league level, the other players and pitchers on the staff to help teach these young guys. And we're really lucky to have a good infrastructure to support that. And guys like Peyton and Connolly were able to continue to grow as they get up to the big league level. And but yeah, there's pros and cons, I think, to both. But trying to take advantage of when these guys can have the most success. We want that to be in the big leagues. We don't want that to be in AA or AAA. So I think understanding that and leaning on that and giving guys the opportunity because they are ready to do so, more so than just like a player needs to be in the minor leagues for X amount of time. There's no rule that says that has to be the case. So let's take advantage of the players that we feel like are ready and move them when we feel like is the right time accordingly through a bunch of different decision-making processes and go from there.
Obviously, players follow different schedules in order to get to the big leagues, but then they follow different schedules once they get to the big leagues, right? And we saw that play out in pretty fascinating fashion, kind of great longitudinal or cross-sectional analysis with the big three, with, Campbell breaking camp, then shortly behind him, being great in April, struggling after that. Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer following him. Those two also kind of following different paths, with both of them ending the season injured. But with Marcelo establishing himself as with a major league glove immediately, and Roman quickly getting to be an impact hitter. Digging in a little bit on those guys. Campbell's been the particularly interesting conversation thus far this offseason. And I know that I believe that there was a plan for him to spend time in Fort Myers. There was also an open conversation about whether he'd be in winter ball this year. Is that still a conversation? Have you guys decided on whether or not he's going, with him, obviously, whether or not he'll play some games in winter ball or whether or not he's going to focus on just kind of the training environments?
He has been in Fort Myers. I think we're still having those conversations with our group and AC and the major league staff about what he will do during this offseason. But I think at the end of the day, we need to do what's best for the player. And we will, whatever decision we make, will be the best for Christian and what's best for the Boston Red Sox. So a couple of different paths we could go down. And I would say we're still having those conversations currently.
And, Craig Breslow suggested last week that there was some thought that it might benefit him to do a little bit less shape shifting around the field, right? Like that was a big ask that's based on his wonderful athleticism, but also it meant throwing a lot of at him all at once while he was still trying to figure out the offensive side of things. How much have you guys been kind of focusing his work in Fort Myers on one area, whether it's second base or whether it's an outfield position? Where are you kind of trying to target his reps right now?
Yeah, at this point, the defensive work has been a little bit more limited. So again, similar to where he'd eventually play Fort Myers or winter ball, ongoing conversations. But I think trying to focus on what really matters is the most important thing. And I think sometimes we ask our players, because they've shown us their ability to handle a lot of things, that we throw a lot on them. And I think Christian's case last year, that probably hurt him a little bit more so than we would have liked. Certainly was not the intention. The intention was to utilize the athleticism, give him an opportunity to have success in all different places in the field, and allow his bat to be the bat that we saw it throughout the minor leagues. So, I think right now the focus has been strength. The focus has been getting his swing back to where we feel like is in a comfortable spot. And everything that Brett said, I would echo. Just we want to make sure that he's focusing on the things that really matter to allow him to have the most success he can for us next season.
And getting to Marcelo, I think that people kind of, made a big deal in some ways out of Craig Breslow saying last week, like, he needs to get bigger and stronger in order to be able to handle the rigors of a season. This has been a conversation that you guys have been having with Marcelo for a long period of time. He's a kid who didn't lift weights in high school, right? Like, and who only started on strength and conditioning in the professional game. How much is his off-season training? Like, has there been a change in tone of it this offseason, or has it been kind of similar messaging to what you guys have had with him in the past?
I think whenever you get to the point where he is in his career, there's going to be a different sense of urgency because you are going to be playing in Boston and in front of a large fan base and for the playoffs. So I think in that sense, the time is now is a reality. We have always talked to Marcelo about gaining weight and getting stronger, but to be fair to Marcelo, I think every time a player walks by my office in Fort Myers, I hand them a protein shake because they need to get bigger and stronger. As you guys know, walking into a major league clubhouse, these guys are big, they're strong, they hit the ball hard, they throw the ball hard, they run fast. All those things are really, really important, and a lot of that starts with a physical foundation that is big and strong. So, I think some guys have different paths than others. Sometimes it takes a longer period of time. Sometimes it's really quick for guys to gain weight or even lose weight. But I think for all of our players, that is a focus. And, Marcelo to be able to play 160 plus games in the playoffs, that will be a focus as it has been. And again, I think for any of our guys, they get to a certain point in their careers where I don't know if it hits different or they just become more mature. We drafted Marcelo as a high school kid. I don't know how I felt when I was in high school, but my perception on life and how things were a lot different 5 years later. So, I think for Marcelo, understanding and being educated about why it's important to do those things is important. And I put 100% trust in his ability to become the player that we all know he can be and has shown his ability to do so. But I think he'd be the first one to tell you too, bigger and stronger is really important. And he's been going to focus on that and will focus on that. He's going to come into camp incredibly ready.
And I also wanted to ask about Jocinson Garcia, right? Who made his major league debut last year. Rob Refsnyder has been a tremendous contributor to you guys in that platoon role, and that as an impact hitter against left-handed pitching. We don't know, Rob Refsnyder's at the beginning of his free agency. Not sure what's going to happen there, but how confident are you that Garcia can be a contributor as a right-handed bat, as a right-handed outfielder, if you do not bring back Rob Refsnyder next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think not surprisingly, we're always going to keep our options open and try to improve the team. Do I think Garcia is someone who I think can do that? Certainly. In what capacity? That's still to be seen. We have an entire offseason ahead of us and different things that can happen. But he's a guy who's going to impact the baseball. Who's going to play plus defense in all three outfield spots, and has shown the ability to do so in the minor leagues. He got the short cup of coffee or small cup of coffee up in Boston this year, which was a great, I think, introduction into the major leagues. But we have all the confidence in the world that he's going to be an impact player at the major league level. Again, similar to the others, when that will be, I think it's still to be determined. But we're very confident in his abilities on both sides of the ball and on the bases as well. But he's shown an incredible, exciting development path over his time. Some guy who's coming from a fourth outfielder in low A to someone who's on our 40-man and potentially is going to impact the major leagues this year in a different capacity. So, to answer your question, yes, when that will be, to be determined.
I guess it's worth stepping back, as we kind of wrap up this conversation. The 2025 season is breaking news done. How would you describe what this year has been in player development, in terms of what it's meant for the talent base, and in terms of what it's meant in terms of what it's meant about how you guys are developing players? How would you characterize the year that has been?
I'll echo our leadership in saying that it was a step in the right direction. I think one of the things that makes player development departments great is their willingness to challenge themselves and not always be satisfied with what has gone well and try to improve the things that maybe have not gone well. I think success leaves clues, and we've found some areas that we feel like we can improve upon and be better at, and we'll continue to push those. We've also found some things that maybe we need to adjust and move away from or change what we've done. So, we're really excited about the player group we have. Our pitching infrastructure and the players that we have taken a significant jump. We've seen a lot of position players graduate and have impacted the major league team, which is awesome to see. But that also leaves, I think, space for that area to improve and grow, and for players to step up as well. But I think one thing we realize is that a lot of what we believe in drives success at the major league level. We will continue to push that with good players, good staff, and good processes. But again, I'd say a step in the right direction. Never happy with where we are, but at the end of the day, our goal is and our job is to provide support for the major league team. And I think this past year was a good representation of that, and we'll continue to try to do so moving forward.
All right, Brian, great conversation. Can't let you go without checking in on the travels of a hockey dad. You are in Florida as we talk, but not strictly for baseball. You actually had a youth hockey tournament down in Fort Myers, is that right? Or on the East Coast, right? Down in Florida?
It was in Fort Lauderdale last weekend. North Stars Platinum. We know we love the levels. Mike Kimplin's team. They pulled off I think it was the West Palm Beach Shootout champions. So they got to play at the Florida Panthers practice facility. It was a ton of fun. Don't know if I love traveling with hockey gear and sticks. That was along with the government shutdown, but we managed. We managed. We had a ton of fun. The kids had a blast, and it's really about bringing the group together. And a lot of what we do, quite honestly, on the player development side, seeing these kids grow and challenge themselves and become a team. And I think sometimes when you're outside of your comfort zone, that happens the most. So it was a ton of fun. Our coaches were great. The parents were great, and we came out as champions. So on to next weekend. We'll see what happens. But I always like to shout out the North Stars. They do an incredible job, and hockey's a great sport.
On to next weekend. I'm not sure if Westboro is quite Fort Lauderdale, but wherever they take you, you'll do it. Brian, good stuff. We appreciate the visit as always. Talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
3:10 to left is presented by your New England Ford dealers who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 3:10 to left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Hi, it's Brian Abraham with a reminder that youth hockey isn't just a youth sport. It is a lifestyle choice. We're talking at the tradition last night. We were talking with some of the hockey people there and just talking about the sacrifices parents make for like, they sacrifice their lives, their friendships, their health, everything to stand at a rink at 6 a.m. And Brian's a great hockey dad. So congrats. That buried the lead, the big North Stars championship down in Fort Lauderdale. That's impressive stuff.
No doubt, and of course, it is. I believe that he drew strength from the shared that Logan Abraham drew strength from the shared birthday with you, Tom. So
I don't think a question. Hey, I showed you before. I got to show you right now. Maybe you can take me screen wide for a second here as we show this. This was last night at the tradition. How cool is this? My 30th anniversary, as everyone's heard earlier this year. Tim Thomas was one of the honorees, the great goalie of the Bruins, and he was number 30. And so he autographed the jersey, and they gave that to me after the event. So that was really cool. So I thanked him.
Next year, the tradition needs to have John Lester so that there can be an autographed number 31 jersey for you.
Yeah, I could see this in a few years, like trying to figure who's a good number 36 that we can honor. Won't be too many of those left. There ain't going to be no Ray Bork at the moment. I promise you that. So thanks, Tim Thomas. That was really cool. It was great to see him too. That such a great part of that championship. But okay, so let's sort of recap and circle back now on where they stand Rule 5 wise. I mean, it's a lot less drama in store, I would think, at the Rule 5 draft than we thought there might be a couple of days ago.
Yeah, well, I thought that I thought that it was virtually locked that the Red Sox were going to be adding both David Sandlin, hard-throwing right-hander, touches triple digits. We've had him on the show before, but he's someone who profiles as being able to help, and he kind of lights up. Analytics in terms of the analytics of his pitch shapes. And then Shane Drohan, as we mentioned at the top of the show, 35% punch-out rate from a left-handed pitcher. You're going to protect him. So I thought that they might not be able to find space for Tyler Uberstein, who's a right-handed pitcher, probably profiles as a multi-innings reliever, or Alex Hoppe, who is a straight bullpen guy, but pumped 100-mile-an-hour fastballs with really good swing and miss numbers against 3 different secondary pitches last year in AAA. But in trading Hoppe away, in being able to trade some of the other guys away and opening up space for Uberstein, I think you're exactly right, Tom, that some of the drama has been taken away from the Rule 5 part. Although I do think that the Red Sox still have both pitchers and at least 1 to 2 outfielders who might draw consideration from other teams in the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, and again, that's the final day of the winter meetings. Now, just a few weeks away in Orlando. I think they begin on Sunday the 7th. So it's about 3 weeks as we sit here now. What will be the next trade with the Chicago White Sox? Have you been analyzing their depth and figure out who they're going after next?
Yeah, I think that the White Sox have the White Sox don't have that pending free agent coming, at least on the pitching side, that quite lines up with the Red Sox as well as they did last year. So but we'll look forward to it. Like take inventory of every left-handed pitcher in both organizations, and maybe Shane Drohan will now be traded back to the White Sox. After all, Drohan was taken by the White Sox in the Rule 5 draft after the 2023 season, but then needed nerve decompression surgery in his left shoulder and was ultimately returned to the Red Sox.
All right, real quick, we got, like I said, we're in that sort of gap now, a couple weeks till the winter meetings. But there were reports yesterday the Red Sox were exploring interest in Bo Bichette. A lot of talk at the tradition last night that Pete Alonso's been around the area. Apparently his wife is from the area and has sort of been telling people he bumps into. Sure, I'd love to play for the Red Sox. I don't know why you would ever say you wouldn't. Why would you?
Right.
Even if that was one of 30 teams you were interested in, you might as well say, sure, I'd love to. But do you, and all of this continues, we keep talking about it, right? The Alex Bregman question is sort of out there on its own. Do you think one impacts the other? Can they do both? Can they go I know they can. Will they dive into the top end of that free agent pool while still entertaining the possibility of bringing back Alex Bregman?
My suspicion is that they wouldn't do two of the premium bats this offseason. I think particularly if you're getting into the so-called long-term risk pool, I think that would be hard. Now, there are different ways to go about it. Like, maybe if there's a shorter term opportunity, might they consider that? So let's say that they sign one of Bregman, Alonso, or even Bichette, right? Like these are the guys who you're bringing up. Schwarber, right? Those are the top four of the available bats, with a little bit of a wild card associated with the players, with the position players coming from Japan. But those are guys who would receive 4-year deals at a minimum, maybe as many as like 8 if you're talking about a younger player like Bichette. I think that there would be room for there to be a reasonably aggressive second play. Now, whether or not that gets up to the level of a Eugenio Suarez, I don't know, but he's a guy who's going to be looking for probably a shorter term deal because he's 34, but obviously has monster power, although he only really makes sense if they don't re-sign Bregman. And then you have another class of players, let's say like the Jorge Polanco's of the world, who are more positionally versatile, but still, really high quality at bat. I feel like the Red Sox are in a position to add multiple position players, but I feel like in terms of the top tier, you're looking at like trying to identify one player from that, and then having maybe a mid-tier free agent. Although Suarez is probably between that top tier and mid tier. He's like 1A in terms of the tiers.
I thought Josh Naylor would have been an interesting signing for somebody. And the Mariners make a good move in locking him back up. But we've talked about that, right? Excuse me, the opportunity to go get somebody a little further down, that mid-tier, and maybe that still leaves the door open for Bregman, right? Because the Bregman thing, as we know, as Scott Boras' guy, that may drag on. You may not know where you stand on Bregman until much later this offseason. Certainly last year, Bregman loved to say, I got it done early because it was the day before position players reported, but it was the very end of the offseason.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and front offices have to make decisions along the way about their sense of urgency to get answers to the question of where they want to go, right? Like last year, the Red Sox had wanted to go hard after Max Fried at the beginning of free agency. Then all of a sudden, boom, 9-year deal from the Yankees that changes. The Red Sox have been pretty aggressive, getting up to 8 years, in the $190-ish million range with Fried, but the Yankees pushed even further, and then the Red Sox had to recalibrate, and they didn't want to mess around. Like at that point, it was important to them to start to find answers for their rotation, and so then they upped their offer to the White Sox in order to be able to pull in Garrett Crochet. And whether or not the Red Sox are going to kind of arrive at an inflection point, how long they're comfortable waiting for Bregman is an open question. I do think that this free agency is going to be different for Bregman than last year's. Like we've talked about how Scott Boras has been very effective in generating bigger markets for players who are like once they return to free agency after getting rid of the qualifying offer. But I think a lot of those guys who have kind of who didn't find the markets that they wanted previously in free agency tend to move in the earlier part of free agency. So it seems like a reasonable timetable, just as a guess, to think that Bregman might be looking at like a December answer to where his next destination is, as opposed to dragging this out until spring training. But that's just a guess, and everyone marches to their own drummer.
No, incredibly, December is not that far away anymore. So we are chugging along. Thanksgiving right around the corner. Great conversation with Brian Abraham. We thank him for dropping by. Alex, I'm going to take a break. No, we'll see you again next week. How's that? We'll do it next week. It's been a long weekend. I'm not going to complain. But David Ortiz. By the way, for future reference, if you're stacking together a number of events that include the David Ortiz Ja Rule experience, put that at the end of your busy stretch, not at the beginning, because you wind up playing a lot of catch up after that. But this was a good one. We appreciate the visit. We will be back next week. But for Alex Speier, I'm Tom Caron. Thanks for checking out this edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. We'll see you next time.